Hey guys, welcome back to Inventing a Better You. My name is Valentin, and in today's video, I'm going to go over the 4 stages of the economical cycle and tell you what you can do during each phase to not only protect your investments, but also to increase and maximize your gains during each one of these phases. All right, let's get in the video. What are the 4 stages of the economical cycle? Well, I've put together a quick graphic here to explain. It starts with expansion, followed by the peak, recession, depression, and the trough. Now, recession and depression are basically the contraction stage, because I said there's only 4, and recession being the beginning and depression the end of that particular stage. Now, it is called a business cycle because this kind of starts and repeats after a certain amount of time. Historically, the economical cycle, the business cycle lasts about 5 years, but that's not set in stone. It could be anywhere between 18 months to 10 years or more. Now, we're currently in a special situation because prior to the pandemic, we were still in sort of an expansion phase for approximately, I think, 9 years or so. And the thing with the pandemic, a lot of things shook because a lot of businesses closed, unemployment increased, and right now, the situation sort of was looking like it was a bit of a recession. We were entering a recession and we stayed in it for about a year or so. But with the massive vaccination campaigns globally, the markets are reopening where there's a lot of hopes for reopening. So we're kind of coming off of it and entering the expansion phase again. At least that's kind of how I see it. But a lot of people have different opinions on this. So let's go through each one of these stages and see what you should do with regards to your investments and how to safeguard them and how to maximize your profits. Now, in the expansion phase, the economy is typically growing up to 3% and stocks enter a bull market, meaning there's a lot of buying and not so much selling. So that's a very good situation to be in. In the early stages of expansion, the small stocks grow the fastest. So these are companies that have a capitalization, I believe, of $200 million or less. It's calculated by taking the share price times by the number of shares, and that's how you find out the capitalization of a certain company. Once the expansion progresses, you can add stocks and bonds from foreign, developed, and emerging markets. So these are very important because you want to have as much exposure as possible to the international markets in this situation. The latter of them, so the emerging markets, experience the quickest upswings during this phase of the cycle. Now, in the later stages of expansion, mid caps and large cap stocks tend to perform better. So an example of a large cap company would be Microsoft or Apple or even Tesla. And the reason they perform better is because these particular enterprises have acquired a lot of profit, and they know how to use it to scale up, to increase their customer outreach, and therefore to increase their profits. All right, so once the expansion hits the very top, we reach the peak, the second phase of the business cycle. And this is usually sort of labeled by an economical growth of more than 3%. Now, with an increase of consumer spending and purchasing, we have an increase in prices, therefore inflation kicks in. And at this point in time, you basically want to sell your stocks or commodities and any bonds that have a high risk of defaulting. So these are also known as junk bonds, and they typically have high yields, but they have a low credit rating and they're very risky. So here the point during the peak is you want to sell as much as possible and maximize the cash and keep basically only sort of fluid investments. Now, as a next step would be to increase the proportion of cash and fixed income. So if you want to have a stable portfolio, instead of selling everything you have, you can look to invest some of your money into, let's say, US Treasury bonds, saving bonds, or municipal bonds, which have much lower risk, but the returns are also lower. But this is, again, focusing on safety. Now, when interest rates are high, you can buy short-term bond funds or money market funds because, again, these are very fluid and have very low risk associated with them. Now, when the interest rates fall, you can switch to corporate bonds that have a high return but a greater risk. So basically, in the peak, you want to take advantage and cash out, but still maintain some of your sort of your favorite investments, the companies that have the highest potential to do very well in the long term, and you can hold on to some of those. You don't have to fully sell all your stocks. You can keep a certain proportion of your portfolio. Now, once the peak ends, you enter the contraction phase, and this is basically where the economical growth occurs and stocks enter a bear market where people begin to sell. Now, in an ideal world, you would time it such that you sell your stocks during the peak, and then during the contraction, you basically sit tight. But most people begin to sell when they see other people sell, and therefore, if you haven't already sold your high-performing stocks, the beginning of the contraction phase is your last opportunity before you incur some severe losses. And you're stuck with basically with your portfolio being at -20, -30 for a very long time. Now, I did mention you can sit tight, but you can also move some of your assets into bonds or cash, but keep some of them in the stocks that have a most promising sort of future outlooks, right? Now, if you have extra cash available, try to repurchase stocks during the lows, but be careful for signs of prolonged recession or depression, as it could last up to 18 months or several years. Basically, depression is a more severe recession that can last a very long time. So when you reinvest into stocks that are hitting their bottom, try to purchase in batches. Don't put all your money at one time, because if you're entering a depression, you can be stuck with basically a portfolio that's gonna stay low for a very long time, and it could continuously decrease. So when you're purchasing that low, that might not be the lowest of the low. So this way, if you buy in batches of, let's say 20% at a time, you can do sort of 4 purchases. That's just like an arbitrary number throughout the year, right? So keep that in mind. And the last phase of the business cycle is the trough. And this is basically when the economy contracts, reaching the lowest stage of the recession and depression. And this is the point when you can start adding stocks. So like I mentioned, you can buy at the lowest lows, and commodities such as gold, oil, and real estate, because these are very cheap during recession. They're usually inversely proportional with the cost of stocks. So when equity does really well, these don't do as well, but it's not necessarily linked. Real estate is particularly an excellent purchase during recession, and it has a very high potential to growth during recovery. All right, so I hope you found these tips useful. And if you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, I'm not a licensed investor. I'm just trying to share a bit of my tips and my experience with you to help you with your investments. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.